All right, today we are talking about one of history's most notorious families, the Borgias. Their name alone brings up images of scandal, power, and corruption. And this quote really just nails it, doesn't it? It talks about rivalries, relentless pursuits of power, and the tragic downfall. This is a family that really embodies both the absolute heights and the darkest depths of human nature. It's going to be a wild ride. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the city they came from, look at how they clawed their way to the top, see what happened when things fell apart, and then try to figure out what to make of their legacy. Okay, first step, a city of ruins. Because to really get the Borgias, you have to get the world they lived in, and specifically, the city they were obsessed with conquering, Rome. And this really gets to the heart of it. In a city completely drowning in chaos, how does one family manage to grab the ultimate power? Because, and this is so important, the Rome we're talking about, it's not the grand, glittering capital you might be picturing. Not even close. Get this, the population had collapsed by 95%. I mean, think about that. From a bustling metropolis of 1 million people under the Caesars, it was down to just 50,000. It was basically a ghost town, a shell of its former glory. It was even called a parasite city, just ruins, poverty, and total lawlessness. There was no real economy, no major industry. People were so scared they literally fortified their homes into mini fortresses with towers. And in a chaotic mess like that, well, that's a perfect power vacuum, just waiting for someone ambitious enough and ruthless enough to step in. And this was the world they were operating in. You gotta remember, Italy wasn't one country. It was this crazy patchwork of city-states. And the guys with the real power were these mercenary leaders called condottieri. I mean, you can just think of them as warlords, leading their own private armies. Brutal, tyrannical, that was the name of the game. So in a world like that, how do you climb to the top? For the Borgias, it all started with one man's calculated ascent, Rodrigo Borgia. And his target? The Papacy. And let's be clear, becoming pope wasn't just about being a spiritual leader. Oh no, it was about becoming a king with armies, land, and immense political power. And this was not a lucky break. It was a game of chess. Step 1. Rodrigo's uncle becomes Pope Calixtus III. Step 2. That new pope immediately starts giving Rodrigo huge appointments, real power. It's nepotism, sure, but it's strategic nepotism. In a world of backstabbers, family was the only thing you could truly count on. That was the Borgia playbook. And this is a really key point. We look at this today and scream corruption, but for them, it was literally a survival tactic. In a political game this brutal, you needed people you could trust implicitly, so putting your family in charge, that wasn't just smart, it was seen as absolutely necessary. Okay, so Rodrigo makes it. He becomes Pope Alexander VI, and now the next generation steps onto the stage. His children, Cesare, Juan, and Lucrezia, they become the pawns, or maybe the key players, in his massive game for power. But wait a second, were they really his children? You'd think that would be a simple fact, right? Nope. Even this is up for debate, which tells you everything you need to know about how messy and controversial the Borgia story truly is. Yeah, there are scholars out there, like Peter Daru, who've done deep dives and basically said, hold on, the evidence that Alexander VI was their father is actually kind of thin. It makes you wonder. So much of what we know about the Borgias comes from their enemies. So how much of their monstrous reputation is real, and how much is just really effective propaganda? So the Borgias are at the peak of their power. It seems like nothing can stop them. And then it happens. A single shocking event that rips the family apart from the inside. The Pope's favorite son, Juan, is murdered. So who did it? Well, the list of suspects was a mile long. You had rival families like the Orsini and the Sforza who absolutely hated the Borgias and had every reason to want them dead. But then there's the most chilling possibility of all, the one people only whispered about. What if it was his own brother, Cesare? And here's the thing, the murder was never solved. Pope Alexander was apparently overcome with grief, just devastated, but then he suddenly called off the entire investigation. Why would you do that? Well, that decision only added fuel to the fire, making everyone believe there was a massive cover-up happening right inside the family. That was it. The murder of Juan was the beginning of the end. Their empire started to crumble, and the collapse was just as fast and dramatic as their rise to power had been. You can literally watch it unravel. First, the family itself is fractured by suspicion after the murder. Then, all those enemies they made over the years, they finally get organized and come for them. Alliances shift. And then, the final domino falls. Pope Alexander VI dies. He was the pillar holding the whole thing up. And when he's gone, the entire empire just comes crashing down. So that brings us to their legacy. To this day, the name Borgia basically means corruption, betrayal, and evil. But is it really that simple? Is that the whole story? Well, when you look at the myth versus the context, things get a lot more interesting. The myth says they were uniquely corrupt, but the context shows they were just masters of a game where everyone was brutal. The myth says it was pure greed. The context suggests they were using family loyalty and, yes, ruthlessness as strategic tools just to survive. And you want to hear something crazy? The famous political thinker Machiavelli, he actually admired Cesare Borgia. He looked at Cesare and didn't just see a villain. He saw the man of destiny, the one person ruthless enough to maybe, just maybe, unite all of Italy and stop the endless wars. For Machiavelli, Cesare's cruelty wasn't a bug, it was a feature. So that's the question we're left with, isn't it? The Borgias. Were they monsters, or were they just masters of their time, a perfect reflection of the violent, cutthroat world they lived in? There's no easy answer, and that's what makes them so endlessly fascinating.